Okay, I see a number of you have arrived. Thank you very much for that. I'll be with you in a minute. I'm just going to do a bit of sharing and I'll be ready to start. So please hang in there. I'll be there very shortly. Okay, I am back. So, Kamala Harris, what the hell is she doing? Or maybe I should say, who the hell does she think she's fooling? I mean, she just has no sense for people. She has no sense for what people may think. Let me make sure that there's no echo on here. Hi, Susan. And hi, Linda. Evangeline. Hi, Bonnie. Linda Evangeline says something. Kenneth Brown joined. Dale Weaver joined. Devorah Firestone joined. My daughter. Dave Phelps joined. Hi, Dave. How are you? And Dolores Pierce joined. Hi, Dolores. How are you? Okay, so here I am. But anyway, that's the question for tonight. What is Kamala Harris doing? She is rapidly painting herself as a very disquieting and very negative sort of combination of John Kerry and Hillary Clinton. She is combining the floppery of John Kerry with the ruthlessness and apparent lack of empathy for people that was exhibited by Hillary Clinton in 2016. I mean, it's really funny. Okay, I'm going to illustrate this, and it's not funny in a good way. I'm going to illustrate this with two articles, okay, that I'm going to talk about now. Okay, the first article is by Mitchell Cares, and it's on the Medium website. And it actually appeared earlier this year on January 30th, so it's really quite old. Let me share the screen with the article. Okay, again, but I'm not going to read it. I'm going to talk it. There we go. So now on January 30th, before the campaign really got into any kind of gear at all, okay, Mitchell Cares was writing, Kamala Harris' record is so appalling that to support her means throwing black and brown people under the bus for nothing but symbolic progress. Now, I want you to keep that idea in your mind. It's a very important idea because a lot of Harris's appeal, or the appeal she had, was this idea of her being a symbol, her being a black woman, and if we elected her, it would be a mark of progress because we were electing the first black woman. The first black woman. So she was presented as someone who, if we elected her, could symbolize progress. And that was a reason to vote for her. Now, how justified is the charge that her record is so appalling that to support her means throwing black and brown people under the bus? Well, okay, in the last of the debates, she had an exchange with Tulsi Gabbard, where Tulsi exposed just a part of her terrible record because Tulsi had only a very short space of time to do it. And she really dealt a serious blow to Harris's chances. In other words, after the first of the debates in June, Harris's campaign was really gaining ground very fast. She went up. She was polling roughly in the 7 to 8% range at that time. She quickly rose to from 15 to 17% in the polls. She was certainly a second-tier candidate with Bernie, okay, and Warren, and she seemed to be cutting into Biden's support. This was based on her attack on Biden in the first of the debates. But in the second of the debates, Tulsi turned the tables on her. And since then, her polling support has been falling. In the latest, I think it was a CNN poll today, I noticed that she had fallen back in that poll. She'd fallen back to 5%. She was polling with Pete, with Mr. Buttigieg at 5%. She had fallen that far, perhaps lost 10 to 12 points since that time. Now, I have to emphasize the CNN poll, the MSNBC poll, the Quinnipiac poll, most of the mainstream polls we see are biased. They oversample people 50 and over, and they undersample people 49, okay, and under. So they would tend to be sampling an age demographic that is favorable to Harris and favorable to Biden and favorable also to Warren and to Buttigieg, but not very favorable to Bernie Sanders. So you can pretty well assume that the 17%, I'm sorry, the 15%, okay, that Bernie Sanders got in that latest poll really considerably underestimates his support. But at the same time, it overestimates Harris's support. So she's probably not even at 5%. I guess she's at more like 3%, that she's probably fallen that far. And it was because Tulsi hammered her on some of the real things, but she's done. But Mitchell Cares also writes about that here. He says politicians and candidates have bad votes or have some policy positions that were bad in the past. And he says in a country as far to the right as America, this is a reality. Some of these politicians never change or shift. Some change their positions at opportune moments, like when they're running for higher office, and some genuinely change their policies and platforms. And he asks, what tells the difference between opportunism and genuine change, or he says, I should say, is how they respond to the grassroots that are pressuring them, the timing in which they make their change, and it can be tough to differentiate sometimes. But when it comes to Harris, her career has been so built up on locking up black and brown people and contributing to mass incarceration that a rhetorical shift will never be believable. And he points out, for 8 years, Harris was deputy district attorney in Alameda County, California. For 7 years, she was district attorney of San Francisco, and then spent 6 years as Attorney General of California. Her entire professional career has been spent, until she got into the Senate, as a prosecutor. And minus a small handful of moments, she spent this time contributing to mass incarceration and a racist criminal justice system, all of which, by the way, is true. Then he says, all this was transparently done to give her a launching point to higher office. And then he says her record cannot be excused. From mocking those that call for more schools and less prison funding, to covering up the routine manipulation of evidence, to trying to prevent an incarcerated transgender woman from getting the needed surgery, to opposing having her office investigate shootings by the police, locking up parents over truancy, and then she laughed about it, by the way. Okay, in an interview, she famously laughed about that, and creating a literal school to prison pipeline and arguing against reducing prison crowding because it would hurt that state's slave labor force. He says these are not exceptions, but a pattern of her career. And to comment on the last one, she kept people in prison for longer than their term so that without any prior training, they could fight forest fires in California while the state paid them only $1 an hour. They had served their time and normally would have gotten out. But she insisted on keeping them on a technicality so they could fight fires, risk their lives for $1 an hour. Mostly black and brown people. Even by mainstream center-left standards for criminal justice, says Mitchell Cares. Kamala does not come close to meeting those standards. She can talk about being the child of parents active in the civil rights movement and evoke some of the same language, but as Bay Area activist Blake Simons writes, Kamala weaponizes civil rights language, as she did, by the way, against Joe Biden in the first debate. Okay, remember, Kamala is not only a super cop, but she is an adamant defender of the institution of policing that is rooted in slave patrols, unquote. And then he points to several excuses that she, of course, points to. That if you wanted to move up the ladder as a prosecutor, you had to be tough on crime, which always, of course, means you have to lock up a lot of black and brown people over marijuana charges, while bankers walk free into executive positions, specifically Mnuchin. She declined to prosecute him over the objections of her staff, over the recommendations of her staff, and he walked free into the position of Treasury of Secretary in the Trump administration. Or declining to say, going on with the article, or declining to say billionaires existing is morally indefensible, while lecturing about how we have to stop very serious crimes. And then Mitchell goes on and says, these are conscious choices being made to go after the powerless because it's politically convenient and giving the rich light slaps on the wrist. He says, taking the easy way out for political power doesn't become less tempting when one runs for president or enters the office. It becomes more tempting. That's absolutely true. And he says, the powerful interests at play only get more intense, and the idea that after spending 2 decades catering to them, that you can simply stop when you want to is naive. And by the way, the second article I'm coming to is going to perfectly illustrate this. You can't simply stop catering to them when you want to. Once you've sold out, you've sold out. Just after saying at a town hall she wanted to eliminate private insurance, her communications team quickly came out to say she would compromise for more moderate health care proposals. These skills as a prosecutor do not translate to suddenly holding the powerful accountable because they are not designed to do so. Her questioning of Kavanaugh, he says Mitchell, was incredibly lackluster. I didn't think she did very well there either. I mean, she looked good, but she didn't do very well substantively. The pattern will not end, says Mitchell. And then he goes further. He says, if you support Harris for president, you're not serious about any progressive causes. Your cheap uses of the intersectionality term become even more hollow when you ignore a vast swath of people being locked up for marijuana charges or the single mothers put in jail because of truancy. Her record is so clear and will only be further laid out before the public in the next year. To continue to support her despite her entire professional career makes her progressive supporters as fraudulent as her label as a progressive prosecutor. Oh, wow. But I think he's right about that. No doubt there's a discussion of what an incredible milestone it would be to have America's first black woman becoming president and breaking the glass ceiling. And he says, this symbolic achievement simply does not matter. Okay, I have to agree on that. We've got a few years now to do something about climate change, and we're going to have to do it contrary to the perceived interests of the very large multinational corporations and the extremely rich people in our country. What matters is being able to stand up to them and being able to do what needs to be done in spite of the massive opposition they're going to mobilize against our efforts and the efforts of our president. So, this symbolic achievement simply does not matter because we are in an emergency situation. We are in a crowded theater, and there really is a fire. And we don't have time for symbolic achievements. We have to get the job done. As Harris, and by the way, the job is not just the climate emergency, it's a just transition to a Green New Deal as well. And Harris has done nothing for poor people. She's done nothing for black people and for brown people. In her whole career, nothing. She's done nothing for women in her whole career other than the symbolic achievements. Going on, as Harris has smashed through every barrier in her climb up the levels of power, the debris and shards of glass have fallen upon the marginalized people and keeping them on the bottom rung of society rather than opening up the path to liberation. The one that benefits almost entirely from such a milestone is Harris and Harris alone. The material needs of oppressed people must be centered when we talk about supporting the candidate, not the excuses of the candidates for the sake of ambition or the symbolic achievement that might be realized or how politically viable someone is or isn't. When those take priority, you're not truly committing to the struggle for the principles of equity and justice. Saying you support policies like the Medicare for All, the Green New Deal, criminal justice reform, and more only means anything when you support candidates that are going to implement them. This must be clear. To support Harris, despite everything she has ever done and the signs that she won't even implement a fraction of the policies we need, is to send a signal you simply want the world to go back to normal when you didn't have to worry about politics. You want someone that says the right words, makes the cool TV appearances, and shows how much they relate to your life by listening to some of the same songs. This is not justice. We already experienced the ceiling for symbolic achievement, and there's no coincidence that the Black Lives Matter movement arose during that exact time period. There should be no support for someone whose entire career looked at such a powerful, brave, and bold movement in the face and said no. Yes, Kamala Harris said no to the Black Lives Matter movement. She looked it in the face and said no. Mitchell Kerr's article was entirely right about this. More evidence just appears. You'll see it in an article in Common Dreams. What has Harris done the last couple of days? The headline, Kamala Harris, who just clarified her rejection of real Medicare for All to snub the Climate Forum in favor of big donors. And this one was written by Owen Higgins, a staff writer at Common Dreams. Well, by the way, there's an update to this article because of the uproar over what I'm about to tell you. A New York Times reporter, Astrid Herndon, reported Tuesday afternoon that Harris will, in fact, attend the CNN Climate Forum, a reversal of her scheduling conflict by declination. In other words, she declined. But anyway, we'll get into this in just a second. In the space of 24 hours, flip-flop, Senator Kamala Harris, a California Democrat running for the party's 2020 presidential nomination, made clear when forced to choose between the interests of the donor class or progressives, she'd choose the former. That is, unless she got a total outcry and terribly bad press, right? On Sunday night, okay, as was reported by Bloomberg, Harris attended a big money fundraiser in the Hamptons, telling the super rich attendees, quote, I believe in capitalism, unquote, and that she wasn't comfortable with a comprehensive Medicare for all plan. Bloomberg's reporters set the scene. Quote, Teslas and also Maseratis lined the street as Kamala Harris greeted guests sipping drinks from plastic cups with her name on them and eating cinnamon sugar donuts from Dreezen's at a fundraiser hosted by movie executive Jamie Patricoff and his wife Kelly as the summer of Democratic fundraisers rolled on in East Hampton. The next day, the Harris campaign told CNN that Harris would not attend the network's September 4th climate forum despite previous commitments. Why big dollar? Oh, citing previous commitments, specifically big dollar California fundraisers. So she wasn't going to go to the climate forum because she had to go to big fundraisers in downtown LA and Hancock Park. Those directly conflicted with CNN's climate crisis town hall, which, as tweeted by Zoreen Shah, Harris was not attending. The 8 other candidates who have qualified for the third debate so far had already said they would participate, and Harris declined to participate. She is the only candidate of the 9 who reached the threshold to participate in the forum, and she declined, which of course was a decision sharply criticized by climate advocates. And so there were tweets by the Sunrise Movement, who said, okay, among other things, debating our generation's survival isn't optional, said the Sunrise Movement. We need a leader who prioritizes the future of humanity over rubbing elbows with millionaires and billionaires. And the climate controversy, article says, came on the heels of sustained criticism Monday over Harris's health care comments. Harris's position on the issue has changed since he first co-sponsored a Medicare for All bill with her rival Bernie Sanders 2 years ago and again this April. Yeah, she co-sponsored his earlier bill 2 years ago, and this April she co-sponsored his new bill, Senate Bill 1129. That was just a few months ago in April. According to comments provided to the Daily Beast by the Harris campaign, the senator told donors that Sanders' bill was one of a number of good ideas that she had signed on to over the years. I support Medicare for all, she said to the donors, but as you may have noticed, over the course of the many months, I've not been comfortable with Bernie's plan, the Medicare for all plan. And Alex Thompson said, Kamala's sent me a full transcript on Medicare for all. And, quote, as you may have noticed over the course of the many months, I've not been comfortable with Bernie's plan. I've been listening to people, and people don't want to, your point, they don't want to not have a private option. Well, I don't know if anyone noticed this, but there is always a private option. That is to say, you could find a doctor, and as long as the doctor, okay, is offering you other services not offered by Medicare for all, you can engage that particular doctor. You just can't get the services of that particular doctor if those same services are offered by Medicare for all. But anyway, as a chorus of criticism over the remarks grew louder Monday, Harris's press secretary, Ian Sams, attempted to spin the decision to change course as a pivot from his candidate. Quote, she has her own health care plan, said Sams. So yeah, Not a secret she isn't running on Bernie's plan anymore. As Jacobin writer Luke Savage noted, Sam's comments were a remarkable use of the word anymore, quote unquote. Yes. Sam's later told the Daily Beast that Harris, quote, was hearing from a lot of voters real concerns, specifically about proactively abolishing private insurance, the 4-year transition, the middle class tax sites, and so she came up with her own plan to adjust for those that, frankly, is better than his. Of course, Sam's declined to say in what way it's better than his. The article then says Harris, whose polling is mired in the high single digits. Now, that was an exaggeration. It appears to be mired in the halfway single digits, more like 5 or 6 or maybe 7, okay, in the halfway region. Briefly reached 15% in early July after a strong debate performance. That temporary bump has receded back to around 8 and 7%. In the most recent CNN poll I saw this morning, it was at 5%. She must have noticed that as well, and that must be why she decided maybe she better cancel her donor appearances and go where the people want her to go. Now, this sets up I don't want to go. I'll say something, okay, a little bit later that I wanted to say now, but what I want to point out here is that notice the pattern. She flip flops when it comes to Medicare for all. Why did she flip flop? Obviously, because she was listening to her donors and they would not tolerate Bernie's Medicare for All plan. Then she released her own Medicare for All plan, which surely is not really a Medicare for All plan. It has a 10-year transition period. She can't even complete the 10-year transition period if she got into office, passed her Medicare for All plan on the first day. On the day she would get out of office, there would still be 2 years to go in her damned transition period. And all kinds of political changes could have occurred in that time, especially when you're taxing people for a Medicare for All plan, and a lot of them are not getting the Medicare for All benefits because the transition is moving so slowly. Now, Bernie's transition is slow enough. A 4-year transition is slow enough, I think, to satisfy anybody. Actually, I think that should be changed and should be made a 1-year transition. I don't see why we need any transition, okay, at all. If we passed a job guarantee plan at the same time, then the people who lost their jobs in the insurance industry would have a job guarantee at a living wage to go to, as well as, by the way, a Medicare program that would be greatly staffed up because of all the additional people it has to handle. Half of the people in the insurance industry would be absorbed by Medicare, would still have jobs in the health insurance industry, okay, in other words, still be doing health insurance. The other half could go to other jobs that would have been created in the economy by the job guarantee and the Green New Deal. The transition is not such a big deal. Bernie compromised with Kirsten Gillibrand, I think, to get her support. That's what got him to his 4-year transition. And Majayapal in the House, who put forward a very similar Medicare for All bill before Bernie, has a 2-year transition because she didn't have a Gillibrand to compromise with. Okay. So anyway, to go back to the point here. So Harris flip-flopped when it came to Medicare for All. And why? Because of the donors. Now, she flipped into Medicare for All, and then she flopped out, okay, of Medicare for All, because she was, until then, an Affordable Care Act supporter. And she probably looked at polls and whatever and sentiment came to the Democratic Party and said, well, if Gillibrand is going for Medicare for all, and if Booker is going for Medicare for all, okay, and if Jeff Merkley is going for Medicare for all, and all these people are running for president, I'm going to run for president too. I better be for Medicare for all as well. I don't want to side with Joe Biden. I want to contrast myself with Joe Biden. That's why she co-sponsored the Medicare for All with Bernie. It wasn't because she loved Bernie or because she loved the Medicare for All bill. At the first sign that she was getting a lot of pressure from donors about it, she ditched it. She ditched it. So she's gotten tremendously negative static about her 10-year transition plan, okay, for Medicare for All. So that's been a flop. Okay, there are very few people who like that. It doesn't do anything for people, for most people, compared to Medicare for All. The Medicare for All plan makes a big difference to me personally and to my family. It makes a big difference to most people's family. It's the kind of thing that other nations have. Harris's plan was just a compromise with the interests. That was apparent, okay, to everybody. Then she underlines the point further because here's this big climate forum that she's invited to, and she's not going to come because she'll miss a function with big California donors. Hey, listen, if her polling falls to 2%, those donors are going to close their pocketbooks anyway. I think someone had news for her and told her that. And she probably figured, I got to get myself over there and I got to debate about the climate and I got to make some waves in this particular climate crisis debate because the climate emergency is getting worse and worse. More and more people are getting energized about that. And if I'm not there, I don't have a chance. And again, she doesn't want to line up with Joe Biden. I mean, Joe Biden is talking about getting off fossil fuels in 2050. I mean, he's crazy. We'll all be dead by 2050. Or if we're not dead, we'll be gasping for air. Anyway, that's what we see here. We see someone who has a career of ruthlessness marked by lack of care for people while she compiles this particular record. When she gets interviewed about it, she chuckles and makes fun of the people she's been punishing and makes light of it, makes light of keeping people in jail, makes light of jailing poor mothers for the truancy of their children when they can't stay home. They have to have jobs or their children won't eat. How the hell are they supposed to ensure that their children do get to school? What's Kamala Harris proposing to do about that? Nothing. Nothing. She proposed nothing when she was in California. She did nothing to alleviate their situation when she was in California. All she did was prosecute, prosecute, and prosecute. And when the time came to prosecute people for illegal foreclosures, illegal foreclosures, fraud, foreclosure fraud. She let them get off the hook, including one of the biggest criminals of all, specifically Steve Mnuchin. She let him off the hook and then got a large contribution from him for her campaign for the Senate. I'm not saying she traded that for the contribution. No, the contribution was, it was a personal contribution. It was limited to $2,800. So she didn't sell herself for $2,800, but she did something for him. And of course, he was in favor of her for the Senate. Why not? So he sent in the $2,800. He probably did a lot more for her in the context of PACs and other things that we don't really know about because those are not transparent. Anyway, so she has a record, of ruthlessness, and now she flips for Medicare for all and then flops against Medicare for all because her plan is not actually Medicare for all. And then she flips for the climate, saying earlier that she was for the Green New Deal. Now, what is she going to do about her climate positions, her previous climate positions? Will she do the same thing with respect to them that she did with respect to Medicare for all? Will she now say she's not comfortable with the Green New Deal? Well, that remains to be seen. And by the way, it isn't clear yet that Tulsi Gabbard will not qualify for the third of the debates. If she does qualify for the third of the debates, she's passed the donor standard already. She has much more than 130,000 donations now. She's probably in the 165,000 to 170,000 category of donations. But she had only one qualifying poll. She made her 2% in 22 different polls. But according to the DNC, she only made it in one poll they consider to be qualified. And I think their standard for a qualifying poll is a qualifying poll that oversamples people who are over 50 and undersamples people who are under 50. In other words, exactly the people who like Tulsi Gabbard. So anyway, but still, there's some time, and by the deadline of August 28th, 8 days from now, it's possible Tulsi Gabbard will qualify. Then the question is, will she receive an invitation to the climate forum from CNN then at the last minute? Now, Tulsi is a person who has been very active in the climate. Right now, the best bill on the climate that has been introduced into the Congress in the past is Tulsi's Off Fossil Fuels Act. That's the best thing that's appeared. The Green New Deal is not a bill, it's a resolution. It's possible in the end that something like the Off Fossil Fuels Act will be brought in to flesh it out. Probably in some sort of amended version. But that's neither here nor there. The point is, Tulsi's been very serious about climate policy and very active in that area, and she's very knowledgeable in that area. And if Kamala Harris tries to flip flop on it in any way, and if Tulsi is in that climate forum, then Kamala Harris is going to rip her apart again. I'm telling you, that's going to happen. That's going to happen. That's what we might be able to look forward to. It's perfectly possible that after her experience in the Climate Forum town hall, that Tulsi Gabbard will want to, what she will want to do is to go back to her donors. She may regret deciding, after all, to go to the Climate Forum. It may turn out to be the case that she would have been better off under the protection of her donors than going into the Climate Forum debate if Tulsi Gabbard happens to show up there. Because I think Tulsi's going to be very combative if she gets into that one. She's going to want to make her mark in the climate debate. But even if she doesn't get into this one, if she gets into the third debate, she might get a chance later. Who knows? We have to wait and see. Okay, I'm going to check on your comments now. And so I want to see what you've been saying. So Linda says, I love Tulsi, and the MSM is scared to death of her and will do anything they can to stoop so low as to ignore her. Yeah, I agree, Linda. And she says, obviously, all the HRC voters will vote for her. I don't know if they'll all vote for her. A lot of them, in the primaries anyway, are going to vote for Biden. Okay, remember, Biden and Kamala are splitting the HRC vote at this point. Also, part of the HRC vote may be going to Warren, by the way. That is, there were some fairly progressive people, okay, among the HRC voters who were voting for HRC on feminist grounds. And they would be people who might be gravitating to Warren this time around. Linda says, it only took me 10 minutes to see her record. Yeah, I know. Now, what in the hell can we do to wake up the sheep? What we can do is we can keep on telling the truth about her record. We can keep on calling attention to her record. We can keep on calling attention to her ruthlessness and to her floppery and to the fact that she's a purely political animal. And she says, I don't know, maybe David Icke was right. I'm not sure who you mean, okay, by David Icke. But maybe you'll tell me. So Linda Evangeline says, Harris was blown away with Tulsi, ha. And then she deflected to something about Biden. Yay, Tulsi. She opened the door to the truth about this woman. She did. She did a great thing. And then Linda says, Joe, I think you're preaching to the choir here. How do we educate the sheep? Well, I don't know that I'm preaching to the choir. I was preaching and you're in the audience, so maybe in that sense I was preaching to the choir, but I don't know if everybody agrees with you here, though they may. And Linda says, can we get some bullet points for this? For what? I'm not sure, Linda. Uh, and Joanne says we must get the medical professionals trained. Yes, we must get some medical professionals trained. But while we're getting them trained, we can also give people services. I don't think the transition is that necessary for that. Okay, yeah, there's going to be shortages, and there are going to be some wait times for a couple of years as a result. But a lot of time of doctors is going to be freed up by the fact that they don't have to worry about the record keeping and dealing with the insurance companies and those kinds of things. They'll be able to service a lot more people under the new system than they were under the old system. Any other comments? Any other questions? Okay, so I see it's getting late. It's much later than I intended to be on. So, at this point, I'm going to thank you for coming, and I'm getting ready to say goodbye. So I'm going to flash my Patreon screen on again. So please share, like, and subscribe, and please become a patron at patreon.com/Joe_Firestone. And I thank you very much for coming tonight and for listening to my streams. Okay, I'm going to end the stream now. Thank you very much.